In this video, we'll be preparing a mousse. Specifically, we're going to prepare a chocolate mousse. There are a lot of flavors out there, a lot of different recipes for different flavors of mousse, but we're going to stick with a chocolate. A mousse is a stable foam dessert that's solidified by fat or gelatin and lightened with whipped cream. So we're going to use a recipe that's the most traditional style with the gelatin. There are some recipes that use other thickeners, other stabilizers than gelatin, but we're going to stick with the gelatin and talk about how to work with that. Mousse is actually the French word for foam. And for our chocolate mousse today, we're going to need unflavored gelatin, water, both cold and boiling. We'll need some granulated sugar, cocoa, whipping cream, and pure vanilla extract. The equipment we need to make our chocolate mousse: we need a small bowl to bloom the gelatin in. We need a small saucepan to heat up some water to boiling. We'll need measuring cups for sugar and cocoa and a straight edge spatula. We'll need a liquid measuring cup for the water. You might need it for your whipping cream depending on the size container you have. But the container I have is exactly 2 cups, so I won't need to measure that. And then we need measuring spoons for the vanilla. We also need our stand mixer to do most of the work on our mousse. You could use a hand mixer if you had one, but if you have a stand mixer, it's a great asset for this recipe. And we're going to use the whisk attachment with our hand mixer. So I've placed 2 tablespoons of cold water in my small bowl. It's nice and shallow. I'm going to have to dissolve the melt the gelatin after I let it bloom. So gelatin is a key ingredient in making mousse. I'm going to sprinkle this across the top so that it's as even as possible. And that's the other reason I have this nice shallow bowl, is I have a lot of surface area for the gelatin to grab onto the water. So gelatin is a key ingredient in making mousse. Our first step, this step, is called blooming, which means the gelatin is softened in cold water. To bloom it, I mix it with approximately 4 times its weight in water. And then I let it sit until it loses its white granular appearance and the water is all absorbed. In the case of this recipe, it's recommended to be about a minute. And then once the gelatin is bloomed, it will need to be melted or dissolved in a small amount of hot liquid. So in this case, we're going to add a 1/4 cup of boiling water, and I have my saucepan on the stove on high, which would be 9 or 10, bringing my water to a boil so that by the time my gelatin is finished blooming, you can see the granules don't move. They're not looking powdery anymore, and it certainly looks like the water has been absorbed. So in just a moment, we'll add our boiling water and we'll move forward in the recipe. While my water is coming to a boil for my gelatin, I'm going to take my mixing bowl and I'm going to mix together some of my other ingredients while I wait on that water to come to a boil. So everything's ready to go as soon as the water is. So I need a 1/2 cup of cocoa. Just measure that heaping. And make sure it's full. So there's my 1/2 cup of cocoa. I also need 1 cup of sugar. want that to be heaping over also. And then I'll level it off. Kind of have some spots that are missing a little there. I'm gonna make sure it's all the way filled, rim to rim, edge to edge. So there's my 1 cup of sugar. Now the next things I need to add into this large bowl are my whipping cream and my vanilla. Before I do that, I want to whisk these dry ingredients together, just to make it easier for everything to come together. So I'm going to add my whipping cream, and I'm going to beat this for about 5 minutes. So I will want to set a timer. I'm going to add my vanilla in there as well. I just need 2 teaspoons of vanilla extract. And I'm going to hold that over one of the measuring cups that I'm finished with. 1. Making sure it bubbles at the edge. 2. Whenever you're measuring liquids, make sure they bubble at the edge of the measuring spoon. So now that the ingredients are together, I'm going to turn it up just a little. We're going to set that timer for 5 minutes. So after about 5 minutes, our whipping cream, cocoa, sugar, and vanilla have become thick and fluffy, and they're ready for the next step when we dissolve the gelatin. So now I have my 1/4 cup of boiling water, fresh off the stovetop, and I'm going to stir that into my bloomed gelatin so that I dissolve or melt the gelatin. And then when we get ready to add it to our creamy fluffy mixture, it has to be beaten in vigorously or it will form inedible lumps, very unattractive in our dish. So I can see in the bowl that everything is dissolved. I don't see any more peaks of gelatin. So having this size bowl with this much surface area was really good for this recipe. No thick pieces of gelatin. And I want to get it into the rest of my recipe before it cools off too much, because I don't want it to start thickening again and create lumps. So we're gonna pour this back in to our dish. We're going to start on low so that it's moving as we add it. Because it's a lot colder in there, that mousse. See, it kind of goes back down, it's more liquidy. And we're going to beat this until stiff peaks form. So now that it's all mixed in, I'm going to turn up the speed. I'm going to pause for just a moment. I want to scrape the sides of that bowl, across the bottom, make sure everything is getting well incorporated, nothing's stuck in a spot. And then I'm going to put it back on a high speed again. going to turn this off and check our peaks. Remember, we want to turn it over, and if it stands up, and that is definitely standing up nicely. So we want to make sure we do not overbeat it, because then it would go back to a liquid and it would be difficult to fix. Then we're going to move that mousse into our serving cups. I've got 4 nice size cups here. And then this has to refrigerate for at least 2 hours before you serve it. It can easily stay in the refrigerator overnight. It is very rich. You can accent it with a little bit of whipped cream if you want. Some fresh fruit, raspberries are recommended because they give a really nice complementary flavor to the chocolate. Trying to keep these pretty evenly sized. Shake those down a little more even. A little flatter across the top. This one is just a little bit full. There we go. So you'll find this to be a really rich, delicious chocolate flavor. Some fresh whipped cream kind of cuts that a little. And if you had some fresh raspberries, that would be a great addition. Strawberries would be nice. But the raspberries are just a little bit neater. The strawberries can get a little bit messy. So here we have our chocolate mousse. After 2 hours in the refrigerator, it'll be ready to serve and enjoy.